In lesson 1, I kind of skipped over some things because I wanted to get to some more interesting details. In this lesson, I'm going to show you some of the things I skipped over, and we'll look a little more closely at that sky sphere, which I didn't do a very good job of. And then I want to show you the 3 types of transformations that you can use on objects in POV-Ray. Okay, here is the lesson 1 that we did before. I want to look at a couple of details. First detail is this part right here, the 320 by 240 AA03. You can actually change these things. Let me leave it there, and we'll run the program once again. And there's our window with our scene from the first lesson. Another thing you might notice is as you move the cursor around that window, you get different numbers at the top. These numbers represent the pixel positions. 00 is the upper left-hand corner, and if you go down to the right-hand corner, it should get close to what we have it set for, which is 320 by 240. I can't quite get there. You can change the size of that window by changing this. For example, 512 by 384. And then if we run it, we get a bigger window. So you can make those windows almost as big as you want, as big as the screen or even bigger, which is what you would probably do if you get a scene that you really like and you want a good copy of the picture. The disadvantage of making the window large is that it takes a lot longer to run, and if you have a complicated scene, it could take a very long time. So I usually keep it set at 320 by 240, and always use AA03. That gives you a higher quality picture. I'm not sure what the AA is for, but that's one of the details I wanted to show you. We are going to take some of the instructions that we wrote in the first lesson and use them again for this lesson. Let's start with the include colors.inc. That's a special file that POV-Ray refers to if you want to use names of colors, such as red, green, blue, and so forth. Highlight it and then copy it. You could do Control-C, or I'm going to use the editor. Now let's create a new file here, a new text file, and go to Edit, Paste, so that we get that include in our new file. Now I also want to take the camera and the light source and the sky sphere from the first lesson, so scroll down to that, drag the mouse across it to highlight it, and then copy that and go to the new lesson and paste it. And now we have a file that tells POV-Ray to put in a camera and a light source and a sky sphere. So if we run this, all we're going to see is that sky sphere, which I translated down half a unit. Oh, if I click on run, it asks me to name the file. So let's call this one less2 for lesson 2. Click on save, and then it should run it, and there it is. There's our sky sphere as we have it. Now the problem with this sky sphere is I hastily said, well, we can move the whole thing down. Let's look in more detail at what's actually happening here. What's going on with the sky sphere is we have a color map. Before I translated it, we got that blue ridge there. So here's our sky sphere, and then it gradually went up from white to blue at the top. Now, my thinking was that I could translate that down half a unit. That means this whole gradient thing, because it repeats itself over and over again. And the effect of translating it down would be this. So if we're looking at the center and we don't look too high in the sky, then we're going to see it gradually go from a sort of a light blue to a dark blue at the top. But the problem is if we change the camera angle and we start looking down more, we're going to see this blue band here, or we're going to see a white band here. Now, the better way to do this would be to scale that whole gradient. And scale 2 tells POV-Ray to make, and I did it with the gradient, tells it to make it twice as large. And so if we try it like that, we should still see a blue band, but not quite as much white up there. Let's pull POV-Ray back and see what happens if I do that. Let me take out this translate. By the way, a way you could take the translate out without really erasing it is put 2 slashes in front of it. That tells POV-Ray to ignore anything after the 2 slashes. It's a handy way to remove things that you temporarily want to remove. And by the way, before I do anything else with this, let me run it to see if I get what I had before. Yes, I do. See, you get that dark line there, and then it starts going up to blue. Now, what I want to try is, instead of translating it, I want to scale it. Scale 2, so I'm scaling that gradient. Let me scroll down a little bit instead of translating it. And if I run it, I should still see a blue band. Yes, I do, but you see it's not, doesn't get blue as fast as you go upwards on there. Now I should do a translation. So I could translate it either up or down. Let me see. If I scaled it, now what I'd like to do is I could move this whole thing up. What would that be? That would be 1 unit. So if I translated the whole thing up 1 unit, then I should get something like this. So it would be white at the very bottom and deepest blue at the very top. So let's follow that scale 2 by translate 1 up. We're translating this gradient thing up 1 unit. Let's try that with POV-Ray and see if that does the job. So let me remove these brackets for translate. I don't want -0.5, I want 1 up. And by the way, I could do 1 down just as well. I'm sure that would work. Let's take a look and see how this looks. Aha! You see, there's our sky sphere. Now we won't run into problems if we change the angle of the camera. If we make the camera look way up, for example, we should see a dark blue. A way we could do that to look up is we could make the y a big number. So look at, say, 100 in the y direction. And yes, you see, we see a dark blue. And if we look down a little bit, like maybe I go down negative, let's not go 100, let's go down -10. If I look down, I should see a whitish. Yes, I do. You see that? So that kind of takes care of the problem. And that's probably the best way to do the sky sphere there. We could use slightly different colors. POV-Ray has a whole help file. If you go to the help file and comes up with contents, and you also have an index which you can use to search for things you know the names of. Let me go to the POV-Ray reference. We're talking about an include file. There is include files here. If I open that up, colors include, I think that's what I'd like to know, predefined colors. And that's very interesting. See, you get a whole chart there that shows the different colors. See here, red looks like this, green looks like this, blue looks like that. You've got magenta, you've got cyan. If you scroll through that, there are lots of different colors that you can use. They even have a dark slate blue. We might try that for the sky. Dark turquoise. I think there's some sky blues in there. Medium blue, midnight blue, interesting. Navy blue. So if you don't like the color of the blue, there's a sky blue. I don't know about that. The colors are above this. But help menu gives you lots of information. Feel free to use that. I'm going to show you a little more about that translate and scale, plus another one called rotate. Let's first change this -10 back to 0 as far as the look at for the camera is concerned. And let's go back to lesson 1 and copy one of those spheres. Let's say the first sphere there. Copy it, and we're going to put it into this new lesson. Let's put it down at the bottom. What's a good place? Right here. Paste it. Okay, I put in a sphere of radius 2, and the center is at x equals -2, color red, so forth. Let's run it to see what we have. Automatically save. Okay, it's 2 units to the left and has radius 2. Let me change that to a sphere right at the center and make the radius 1 because I want to play around with it, show you some other things. Okay, there it is. It has radius 1. Now, what I could do is I could take that sphere of radius 1 and I could scale it by 2, and that will give you the same result as if you had made the radius 2. Another thing I could do is I could translate it to the right 2 units. And it has radius 2, and it's translated to the right. So that's what scale and translate do. You can do something more interesting with scale. You can actually scale the x, y, and z parts of it separately. So if you give 3 numbers in angled brackets like this, say I scale it 2 in the x direction, but only 1 in the y and z directions, and by the way, you never scale an amount of 0 because that'll make it disappear. This gives you something very interesting right there. See? Another thing you can do, before I translate it, but after I scale it, I can rotate it. Rotate the scaled object. Rotate takes 3 numbers too. The first number is an angle in degrees about the x-axis. That wouldn't be very interesting. Second number is about the y-axis. The third number is interesting in this case. That's about the z-axis, which points in and out of the screen. So I'm going to rotate it through 45 degrees in the z-axis and then translate it 2 units. Watch this. See that? Really cool. Well, that's all I'm going to do in this particular lesson. Next lesson, we will look at other kinds of objects that you can make in POV-Ray.